Good afternoon. Thanks for the nice warm welcome. All right, I am joined with some super smart, powerful women in the technology industry and excited to be here this afternoon. My name is Melissa Mayer, and I'm a Senior Vice President at Expedia. And I would love my panelists to introduce themselves, give a little bit about your background and why you're passionate about women in leadership. And Anne, I'll have you go first.
Hi, I'm Anna. I am a lead game designer at Zynga, and I run a team there of designers. And I'm passionate about this topic in particular because it kills me inside when I see people talk down about themselves and not realize what their capabilities are. And so I drive a lot of my work this way, wanting to bring people up and make sure that they can do the best job that they can, because I think that builds wonderful teams. And this is something that is especially pertinent with women in particular, and I want to see that go away.
Great.
I'm Betty. I'm an investor at a VC fund called S28 Capital. We're based in San Francisco. We invest in seed and Series A and Series B stage startups. I'm really passionate about women in leadership and also women in investing because I think traditionally the venture capital industry has seen a dearth of women who are able to sit at the table. And that has led to a lot of scenarios in which great founders, great teams, great companies have been underfunded or not funded. And I've seen this kind of and again in my tenure as a VC. And so I would love for more women to sit at the table, both on the boards, as founders and as investors.
Hi, I'm Vanessa Pigueros, and I, as you know, work at DocuSign for my picture there, and I've been in security about 15 years now. And I'm passionate about this because I feel like women bring a very different type of thinking to the environment and how they solve problems. And I think that we need to balance that out more in business, especially at the higher levels. And so I think of women as diversification in a way of like when you have a high performing portfolio financially, you don't just want one kind of, instrument in your portfolio. You want a variety. And I think women bring that. And I want fundamentally business to do better, to make better decisions. And I think women help bring that aspect into business.
Great. Very, very well said, all three of you. And one of the things that we know is important is for women to empower themselves. And clearly the three of you have done that in your careers. So if you were to give advice to women about how they can take control of their careers and how they can empower themselves, what advice would you give? And I'll go in this direction, then I'll shake it up a little.
Set a vision for yourself. Even if you don't reach that end vision, it's a great way to identify what your gaps are. I love doing a personal gap analysis on myself or helping my direct reports do their own. And look at the jobs that you want to achieve at some point in your life and what are the skills it's going to take to get there. I work with a lot of young people in the industry trying to come out from college and figure out what they want to do. And the things that they say about what they not knowing what they want to do in life are very reminiscent to the things that my colleagues also say about their careers. And that's shocking to me to go throughout your career and still not know where you want to go or how to get there. And so I always encourage everyone, especially women, to really take control about what it is that they want to be doing and what are the steps to get there.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think anytime you're walking into a new role or exiting a role, I think it's always really important to take a step back and understand kind of what are your ideal entry points and also what are your ideal exit points for each role. Essentially, strategically, where you would like to be in your career after spending like X number of years at a company, working with a certain product, et cetera. I think the other thing too to really keep in mind is you are truly the driver of your own progression, right? And I think to that respect, everyone talks a lot about like mentorship, sponsorship, kind of male allies. But I think one thing that you have to always be doing in each role is understanding what kind of value can I bring to any organization, to any team. How does this value correlate with my existing skills, networks, expertise, all of that, and really kind of bringing that value to the teams and organizations. And then kind of going from there, you can ask for and also get sponsorship, mentorship, allies.
Vanessa, I'm going to twist the question a little bit for you. You've had 11 different roles in 15 years, which I think is a very unique experience.
A little longer than that, but yes, in security, I've had a few.
In
but
security.
my total career, I've had 11 different jobs. Yes.
Okay. So in
Companies.
11 different companies. So talk about you gaining experience from the different companies and in your experience with those 11 different companies, how that made you become who you are today.
So I think one thing I do want to hit is like I didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do in my 20s. And I think that most people don't always know exactly what they want to do. So I always tell younger people, experiment, go try different things, figure out what you don't like, narrow it down to what you like, and try as much as you can. But I think for me, I did that in my career, and being, probably the oldest one on this panel here. I was early, and nowadays, if you stay at a job longer than a couple of years, people are like, "What's wrong with you?" Back then, when you weren't at a job for 5 or 8, 9, 10 years, they would ask you what's wrong. So it's flipped a little bit, but I've always pursued if what the job offered me was what I internally kind of needed and enjoyed and was developing me, then I stood at the job. If it didn't, I moved on to another opportunity. And I think that's part of taking control of your career. It's like I never expected the company to take care of me or my boss. I mean, I took care of my career and I plotted out what I wanted to do. And so that made me very much, I'll move on if I'm not getting what I need from a career standpoint. And I think that's what companies want essentially anyway. They want people who want to be there and who really are driven by the mission of the company or the type of work. So for me, it's about being in alignment with your job and what your goals. And if you're not, go do something different.
That's great. My experience is a little bit different. I've been at Expedia 16 years, so I've done the opposite, but have that alignment with values and goals. We talked a second ago about mentorship, and we had in earlier sessions, we spoke about coaching and mentorship and sponsorships. Who can you tell this group who your mentor sponsorships are and how you went about seeking those and what your advice would be? And Anna, I'll start with you.
I was definitely one of those self-loathing people early in my career. And I would interview for jobs within the same company. And through those interviews, people would see a spark inside of me and they would want to hire me for their team. And I had one of those people, his name's Michael Doom. He just renamed himself when he got married. So awesome. And he reached out. I think he was one of the first people that really reached out to me and said, "Why do you hate yourself?" And I was like shocked and devastated. I was like, "Wait, who are you? And why are you asking me this in a one-on-one? This is like not therapy."
But I think it might have been.
It was. And it shook me, and I realized that I was projecting this perception of myself, which I think made me go unnoticed. And he was someone that cultivated kind of like the best in me and would give me opportunities on that team to drive results, drive decisions. I restructured that entire team. And it kind of took someone seeing that inside of me for me to actually bring it out. And from then on, I started seeking out more sponsorships more actively. And I will ask people directly, will you either sponsor me or be a mentor? And I've also had people just do it outright without me kind of realizing it. Through a lot of my volunteer opportunities within the company or outside the company, and through some extracurriculars that I had been driving, that people realized that I was someone who could lead projects, even if it wasn't on my direct team. And they wanted to see me grow more on the team level and went out of their way to help support some of my initiatives, and also started kind of spreading the word about certain leadership skills that they were seeing, and trying to make sure that I was being put in the best position to move forward in my company.
That's great. That's a good story. And let me ask you the reverse. Do you actively sponsor and mentor people and pay that forward?
Yes, I do actively sponsor and mentor. I've started a mentorship program through Zynga. We have a program called Women at Zynga, and I will take on about 2 to 3 mentees a year, and hopefully they come back and continue that mentorship. I've done co-mentorship programs where I mentor a peer and they mentor me back, so it's kind of nice to have that sounding board. And I most recently just started doing like more sponsorship because I'm now in a place. Well, I feel like I'm in a place in my career. I found out today you could be under somebody and still sponsor up. But I'm now in a space in my career where I can help better sponsor both men and women at my company or at other companies to help them in their career. I love sticking my neck out for people, especially if I think that they're really awesome and they can do a great job. Yeah.
That's great. That's great. Betty, what about you? Who's your
Yeah,
mentor?
absolutely. So actually, before I joined VC, I was an early employee at Uber. I started in early 2012, was one of the first 100 employees. And my first boss was really a fantastic mentor there. And so I started out in Uber New York, basically when the team was like 3, 4 people at the time. And after about a year and 4 months of doing everything from like supply operations, user growth, all of that, my boss and I had a conversation. Was like, well, you joined Uber when there were 75 employees. Now there are over 400, and you should really be looking for other interesting opportunities within this organization because it's growing. And so we were talking about like product opportunities. We were talking about potentially like expansion launch opportunities, and I was always very shy about kind of seeking those out because I was 23 at the time, and it seemed really intimidating because everyone being hired at Uber, and Uber was hiring at a crazy clip, seemed extremely qualified, seemed kind of much more confident than I was at the time. And so my boss literally actually took the step of like forwarding me all of these opportunities. And so eventually, when Uber was launching in China, he's like, you cannot forgo this opportunity. Like, you can speak Mandarin. You're from Shanghai originally. You have all of these networks in China. Like, this is something that you should absolutely go after. And so reluctantly, I applied and kind of got the opportunity to launch Uber in China for a little over a year, which was an amazing learning experience, and probably would not have happened without his sponsorship. But I think that really only happened because I worked incredibly hard to basically make sure that Uber New York at the time was a success. And so being in charge of supply growth, we were basically 120 vehicles in New York when I started. We were over 4,000 when I left. And so I think it really goes back to this sort of this message of essentially prove your worth to any boss, to any team, and that person will have the incentive to mentor and sponsor you.
All right, that's great. I'm going to shake it up for you again. Um,
Dangerous being at the end here.
I know it is. So we talked a little bit about what some of the companies are doing to focus on gender diversity and inclusion. And important to a lot of the conversations earlier today, important to have top leadership really supportive and involved. And I know from our conversations, your CEO is actively involved. And can you tell us a little bit about that and how that's moved things along?
Yeah, so we got a new CEO about a year ago. His name is Dan Springer. And I would say that, it is so critically important. I've seen the actions that Dan's taken. He instituted a global D&I council. He talks about these issues at all company meetings. He puts goals and priorities in around it. And his sponsorship and his approach to D&I, I mean, it's still we still have a lot of improvement to go. If you ever look at our like board of directors, or even till recently, we had all white males on our executive staff. And since Dan has come, we now have 2 women there. They still are white women, but there's some diversity there. So he's really been able to not, really take action, not just talk about it. Because I feel like a lot of companies are talking about it now because they have to talk about it. But I actually have seen him really doing something about it. And I'm not saying we're done, and I think we have a lot more to do, but at least I see positive change. And I think even in the hallways, we're starting to talk about these issues more where we never did before. They weren't like a topic. So
That's great. Our CEO at Expedia is also very involved, and talking about talking just in general, having the conversations is very important. One of the things that we did at Expedia is we made an active point to make sure to bring the men along in the conversations. And so, as far as at both of your companies, have you done something to bring the men along, and how important do you think it is to have men actively involved and men as allies? And I'll open it up to either one of you.
I think it's super important. At Zynga, we actually have our sponsorship from a staff that is almost primarily men. And our one of our two staff members in comms, Danny Dudek, she's been really passionate about our Women at Zynga program. And as soon as we got our new CEO a couple years ago, Frank Jabot, and he actually went to her and said, "We want to make sure that this place is inclusive and is a great place for women to work." And that was his initiative. And because Danny was bought in already, she was like, "Yes, let's do it. I have a plan already." And I was part of the board on that board at that time, and we talked about a couple of different ideas. One of them was doing executive coaching for a lot of our women who are at the middle of their career and ready to step into leadership roles, and ended up getting a ton of funding for that. We actually work with Artemis now as part of our executive coaching program and leadership counseling, and that could have not have happened without our male allies. They've been a crucial part of our process. That has trickled down from from our CEO to general managers who are running teams and, of course, want to mimic what our CEO is doing. And they have been great allies at the team level from that mimicry. And I've just seen a complete change in the last couple of years just from that alone.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Betty, how about you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in terms of male allies within the VC world, I think they've honestly been kind of become male allies more so by force rather than by, I guess, their own volition in many ways, right? And I think kind of tracing the history of this, we've all known that kind of having more women and more minorities within VC has been important for the last 10 years, but it really got started with the Ellen Pao case back in 2014, 2015. And then, of course, the wave of sexual harassment kind of scandals over 2016 and 2017. And so I think there is a trend right now where, especially in the Valley and also in other parts of the US, you do see kind of every major fund trying to hire at least one female GP, which I think is a fantastically positive trend. And giving and really giving her equal access. So basically, this person is someone who can lead deals. This person is someone who can write checks, which is super important. And I think that definitely is a very positive trend. I think within the venture world specifically, though, a lot of the allies have actually really been women as opposed to men. So I'm sure that some of you have seen the All Raise kind of group make news in the last few months. It's basically a group of female GPs and female investors who have banded together and been like, hey, we would like to get women in VC funds. We would like to get women on boards. We would like to get female execs who are interested in investing across all levels, whether it be angel syndicates, seed funds, Series A funds, et cetera. And I feel like that movement has probably been one of the most positive occurrences from the last few years of what's been happening in the industry. And I think the other thing too is I think it's also founders who have really inspired this change. I think it's a combination of female but also male founders who have really pushed for a lot of these changes. So.
That's great. That's great. So let me switch gears a little bit. I'm doing it to you again. This is a common theme. So we talked in your opening. You talked about how women have different skills and different assets. So being in a primarily male-dominated field, can you talk about some of those skills and how you can pull those out from women and what some of those differences are?
So, one of the things that I think, so it's been proven through brain science that women have more connections between the different sides of their brain, which promotes things such as multitasking, communication, collaboration, all traditionally kind of female attributes that that we all know. I'm again, these are I'm not saying every single situation, but definitely is in general. I think women definitely multitask better in my experience than men, and I've been leading technical teams for 20 plus years, and I've observed this. So I think when I look at security, which by the way, my title is CISO, not Cisco, or So, but anyway, I that's Chief Information Security Officer. So, my observation is some of the skill sets I need, the complexity of attacks and the threat environment is so high that you need people who can see the big picture and kind of put everything together. And I like the person who leads up my incident response team is a woman, and she sees like the connections, actually formerly Microsoft, she sees the connections that some of the other team members don't. Her brain is like looking at things from a very different perspective. And I think women have those qualities. Plus, during an incident, what do you need more than anything? You need communication and collaboration. So these are strengths that I've observed. I think men are really good at things like diving deep into the technical forensics, and like they do. I'm not, again, generalizations, but I do think it's going back to the comment I made. It's the richness of your team and how you think differently. And so I think you can't have a rich team without that, without women on the team.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, we're getting close on time, so I want to be cognizant of that. Um, let me ask one final question to each of you. If you could give any advice to a woman to empower a woman and she couldn't fail, what would your advice be? It can be broad and strategic or narrow and tactical. Any advice that you would give?
Everything's difficult, everything's hard. And the advice I usually give is it gets easier. You just have to show up every day, work through a lot of the hills and hurdles of the job, and just know that through that, it's going to get easier tomorrow. I find a lot of women and also men tend to kind of give up and move on when things get difficult. But if they persevere, it is going to get easier.
That's great. Betty, how about you? What advice would you give?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is probably more so for younger women, but I think applies to everyone really. I think honestly, like if you are looking to potentially fast track your career, fast track in terms of just actual like progression or skill set building or all of that, I would say consider joining something that's relatively early stage. I think when you're in a mature organization, like the level of institutional learning that you get is amazing and is fantastic. And if that's kind of your cup of tea, that's great. But I think consider joining something a little bit early, just because I've seen so many people sort of in many ways kind of do things and also be in roles where they sort of were a little bit like I would say not up to that level just yet, and it was an unfair competitive advantage that they were basically given those responsible for the things that they were responsible for at the time. And so I think that's definitely one piece of advice. I think if you're in your 20s, if you're in your early 30s, and kind of your finances are not like a huge like onus on you at that point, consider joining something early stage and taking a little bit more risk for potentially more reward.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And you have an interesting career where you've been in two startups that failed. And so I think that experience has probably helped you grow into who you are today. Thank you. Vanessa, last
Oh,
but
you
not least.
just took my. I was gonna say Don't let fear drive your decisions. Don't let that lack of confidence or the fear that you're going to failure, that you might fail, drive your decisions. Just put yourself out there and flow with it. Sometimes you fail, and that's okay. But you know, if you never try, you definitely are gonna fail. So
That's great. All right, please help me give the panelists a round of applause, and thank you all very much. Thank you, ladies.